Well, my next guest has some interesting stories here. It's Brandon Waltons from Texas Scorecard. Keep it going for Texas Scorecard. They use their stories a lot. They provide a lot of content for the James Show. Brandon, I want to start with this bill that the governor's behind. Governor Abbott's got a bill that will prohibit non-human behavior in Texas classrooms. Is this really necessary? What's going on?
Apparently so, based off of some of the stuff we've seen from some districts. This bill, particularly House Bill 4814 by Representative Stan Gerdes, also known as the Forbidding Unlawful Representation of Role-Playing in Education, or the Furries Act. I'm not sure where they get the S from, but I guess it sounds good. But it essentially takes aim at these furries that supposedly, according to the author and according to Governor Greg Abbott when he was speaking last week, and an event I was at, where you do have school districts that are allowing kids, and I say kids, up to, high school maybe even, that are dressing up as animals, that are, wanting litter boxes, et cetera. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but here we are, and here you have the governor throwing his support behind this legislation.
Yeah, I think some people are hearing about this for the first time. I've heard it referred to as therians. I've heard it referred to as furries. I've heard it referred to as pup play. We had a puppy play general that resigned a few years ago. I think that was the first time it really made it into the news. I didn't know kids were participating in that at school, though. Is that what we're talking about?
That's what they're saying, and that schools have. You have some districts that have encouraged it, some schools that have allowed them to do that. And as you can imagine, it's for every other student in that classroom, it's a major distraction.
Well, the problem is I don't care if people put on cat ears as a headband and meow every once in a while, but it's a sex thing.
Oh yes, I mean that's where it's sort of at the root of it, right? It's sort of this. Weird sort of fetish.
Well,
thing.
the term I like for this, Brandon, it's a socio-sexual activity is how it's.
I think that's probably the perfect term for it. In any case, it's inappropriate for schools. It's a major distraction. It's something that the governor says, the legislature, absolutely needs to pass this. Now, it's crazy. I mean, we go back to this, but it's crazy that this even needs to be discussed. Can you imagine, 10 years ago, telling someone about this bill or that it was necessary? I mean, it's hard to believe just how wild some things have gotten in schools.
Well, yeah, like when we saw the guy in the gimp suit in Pulp Fiction, that was the scariest thing we've ever seen. Now it's just like, we'll do these weird sexual kinks with school-age children.
Mm-hmm.
That can't be allowed to become normal. The other thing I wanted to point out on your website, TexasScorecard.com, Brandon Waltons, is not one, not two, not three. There's 6 stories of teacher sex in the last week on your website. Why isn't this getting more attention? I mean, when I go to your website, I'm starting to think that this is just happening all day, every day.
Oh, I mean, unfortunately, and as we've said when we've talked about this before, this isn't even exhaustive. We don't cover every single case of it. We couldn't, or the entire front page, right, would be covered with it.
Right.
But it is unfortunately very prolific. It seems to be happening more. It's not unique to any given area of the state or any particular types, urban or rural. It seems to be happening everywhere. And, as long as it does, we're going to continue to report what the districts are doing about it. And parents can make up their mind there. But it's certainly something that we've seen, unfortunately, a lot of the legacy media ignore.
Well, of course, because if stuff like this got reported on in the manner it deserved, like today we're reporting on also the pastor that turned himself in for sexual abuse. Legit story. Cool. So are these. I don't want y'all to stop reporting on that. I want you to include this. School choice would be a no-brainer. This would have gotten passed 10 years ago if we were aware of this. And just for a quick summary here, there was a 50-year-old 5th grade teacher in the Austin ISD at Baranoff Elementary School that taught sign language, got caught with, under the classification of his felony, 50 or more images or videos of child pornography. There was one in LaPorte, another first-degree felony, possession child pornography. Ames ISD, same thing, more than 50 images. Belton ISD had 2 teachers, one at Tarver Elementary School and another one at South Belton Middle School. Someone had I don't want to say this, with a 13 to 14-year-old female more than 10 times. Lake Belton High School had another one. There was one in Fort Worth Independent School District. Young Men's Leadership Academy had a 44-year-old science teacher hitting up what he thought was a 14-year-old boy on Instagram. By the way, great job to DFW ped catchers. These pedo catchers are amazing. But you guys are keeping a map of this, and it's not even a map anymore. It's just like a bunch of dots in Texas.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's filling out. We're seeing it in more and more counties, more and more cities across the state.
So, do we actually think we're going to get school choice after all that?
I think the legislature is closer now than they've ever been. I mean, I think you see that in the way the governor's spoken about it, but it's always been the Texas House that has been the roadblock on this. This session, you have a majority of members signed on as co-authors to House Bill 3, which is the House's version of school choice. Now, people on the left and the right have all sorts of criticisms of this, the specifics of the legislation. So there's still a lot of time, but what we're seeing now is you have more co-authors, more support for it in the House. I suspect they will pass something that is school choice. The question is, will it be large enough to be impactful? Will it be universal? Will it be without strings? I mean, these are the details that'll be worked out in the next couple of months. But I expect that, maybe I'm just being optimistic, but it feels like this session is the session where we're going to see some movement on it.
Well, I hope so, and I appreciate you helping us keep an eye on it. Brandon Waltons from Texas Scorecard. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Find his work, TexasScorecard.com. TexasScorecard.com. Let me show you the story that got a lot of people's attention. You can find this one on the Twitter feed for WBAP. If you're already on Twitter, X, whatever it is, you probably saw this yesterday like I did. There's a trucker in Arkansas who got pulled over. Proficiency test for English. What's going on here? And then he explains his ordeal in about a minute and a half, and that brings up the whole slew of topics for our next discussion here. Should truckers be allowed to get pulled over and given a proficiency test for English?
Couldn't believe it. Going through Arkansas, I thought it was a joke. Got stopped at the weigh station in Arkansas and was handed a piece of paper. And it says, "Can you read and write English?" I said, "Yes, sir, I sure can." He goes, "Can you read this?" So I read it to myself, and I was like, okay, I started handing it back. He goes, no, read it out loud for me. So I read it out loud for him, and, it's short and sweet, no problem. He goes, now, can you write this for me on this paper? And I did, and there was a whole bunch of people that had already written on it. And I was actually witnessing people in handcuffs that had been pulled in. And I was like, what's going on? He goes, we've come across now that if you cannot read or write in English, that it's a $5,000 fine. And if you have a company in Arkansas that employs people that can't read or write in English, it's a $10,000 fine paid on the spot. If you cannot pay it, you're automatically arrested and lose your license. What a shocker.
Ooh, what do you think of that? 800-288-9227. Let's go to Kim Hillsborough. You're on WBAP. Are you okay with truckers getting an English test?
Absolutely. If we don't protect the other drivers, I mean, if some drivers can't read English, they can't read the street signs. And I've had people actually come toward me on a one-way street that couldn't read or write English.
Well,
I talked to them afterwards.
All right, I think you and I agree philosophically, but just from a different angle here, I'm not worried about the safety issue of illegal immigrants coming in here and being truckers. No, they're not proficient in English, but for the 12 words that you have to learn to understand most signs, exit, stop, whatever, yield, they probably learn that pretty quick. And we don't have in the news a whole bunch of stories about Mexican truckers or illegal immigrant truckers running into ditches or causing accidents because they couldn't read a sign. I'm more concerned about the American truckers who are being undercut, the American truckers who just got underbid for the next contract, especially the owner-operator guys who own their own rig and they can't absorb hits. If they're being undercut by these illegals coming in, I think that's more important than the safety issue, because I see more truckers being undercut and having to go find another job or sell their rig or just eat a lower salary. I see more of that than safety issues caused by illegal truckers and their lack of English proficiency. So I don't think the English proficiency is necessarily a problem, but I think it's a good drag net to get some of these guys that shouldn't be here in the first place out of here. And I also like, Kim, the idea that it's going after the people who employ them more than it's going after the end user.
Mm-hmm. Also, with more wrecks, maybe insurance would be going up for the regular American truck drivers.
Yeah, that's worth a thought, too. All right, well, great call, Kim. Appreciate it. Let's go to Hayden in Arlington. You're on WBAP. What do you think about truckers getting an English test?
Hey, James, totally fine with it, man. So the thing that I was bringing up is that whenever you are an airline pilot, right, all airline pilots, no matter what country it is, have to speak English, right, have to be able to understand English. So if you're a big rig driver driving a, big old bus in the United States where our main language is English, then why shouldn't you be subject to that kind of, testing? It also, as you were saying, with really, I didn't even think about it, brings a huge point of the people who are being undercut and underbid. And, this is totally a way to kind of ease their way out of it without a huge, without a hindrance, I guess. A way for them to make it work for them, Well, the thing that comes up in the fact checks under this story and when people start to debate it in the comment section is there is a federal law, 949 subparagraph 391.11B2. God, I'm so glad I'm not a lawyer sometimes. It says a CDL driver must be able to speak and read English and understand highway traffic signs and signals in English. So there's already a law. They're just enforcing a law that's on the books, which kind of makes me think, and probably you too, Hayden, think like we've just had this law this entire time and we've been ignoring it for the last however many years this thing's been in effect. How many of these other useful common sense laws are we ignoring that if we just enforce stuff that was already on the books, our life would change dramatically? Well, yeah, now we finally got somebody who's looking at what we should have been looking at the entire time and finding a way around it instead of just ignoring and sticking a Band-Aid on the problem or throwing money at it.
Or just saying, well, jeepers, yeah. I don't know if there's anything we can do. I guess I'll just have to go raise some more money or something. All right. Thank you very much, Hayden. Shelly Alito, you're on WBAP. What do you think about truckers getting English tests?
I think this is absolutely perfect because it's already a federal law, as you said, and it makes sense that Arkansas can choose to enforce if they wish. Thank you, Sarah Huckabee. But I think that it will be a great way to ensure the roads are safer, but also the people that are here undercutting, like they said, other drivers that are American, but they can't really, get the jobs, they would be better off. And this is finally a American first country. Thank God that we have President Trump, but we just need to be happy that this is happening.
Wait, you pointed out something good. This is probably the doing of Sarah Huckabee because, it's the local law enforcement controlled by the governor. We could just do this here immediately if Greg Abbott wanted to. They could do this in any state if their government wanted to.
Absolutely right.
You know what?
Absolutely right.
Big kudos to Sarah Huckabee Sanders because that's what leadership looks like. You being the first one to do something that makes sense and works, and then everybody follows you. Yeah, that's a good little thumbtack to put in our memories there. That's Shelly and Alito knocking it out of the park. Let's not forget the rest of the world. Michael Brown's here to help us keep an eye on it. Welcome back, Michael Brown. It's been a while. Welcome back to the James Show.
Hey, thanks, James.
Yeah, so there's a lot going on. Where do you want to start with first? Ukraine, Russia, Israel, Gaza, Iran, and the Houthis, or the flight to El Salvador with a bunch of Venezuelans on it?
Well, let's take it. What's the greatest threat to the United States right now? And that's going to be the cartels in Mexico.
All right, let's start there. So I'm guessing the flight came with a lot of controversy when it didn't get turned around from the judge. Is that even in your purview, or do you just really deal with stuff once it's outside of our borders?
Well, I mean, it's all kind of linked in, right? You have Tren de Agua, MS-13, who are associated with narco trafficking. They're actually connected to the recently declared FTOs, or foreign terrorist organization, the Sinaloa cartel. So this is a really significant event that these two highly sophisticated gangs have been moved out of the country, linked to foreign terrorist organizations. So that's a definite win for U.S. security.
So I'm making an assumption here that if Tren de Aragua people, they're from Venezuela, they're going to be held in a Salvadorian prison. Did we work out some deal for Bukele to keep, to him, foreigners in his own prison?
I think there would have to be some kind of high-level arrangement. I mean, Bukele is probably the only real strong support the U.S. has within Central and South America. So that being said, there definitely has to be an agreement to take Venezuelan nationals into his prison system. But
we're paying for it, I guess.
I would assume there's some quid pro quo in that arrangement. Yes.
Well, what's the criticism here that, they haven't had their final immigration hearings, and so we're breaking due process and this is unconstitutional?
Well, theoretically, you could claim that these individuals are providing material support for a terrorist organization. And so, therefore, I think it would fall under the president's purview to have these individuals deported as providing material support, again, to a designated terrorist organization.
But these guys, are these guys that were already in prison for other crimes?
I think they had committed other crimes, and so they were led into the country with that statute, with that situation already in place. All the Trump administration did was have ICE go out and detain them and then deport them.
Okay. I thought it was adorable, too. In the video that I saw this weekend, the criticism was like, how do you even know? We're just assuming they're all gang members, but if you lift up the shirt across the back, it says MS-13 and a giant tattoo. It's like, well, can we at least deport that fella?
Well, I think if you were to look at ICE, if you look at the detention records, the arrest information provided by ICE, you would see much more detail. Some of these individuals, well, yes, they will admit that they were associated with those gangs, but, we don't have access to the intake information, the arrest information, the briefing information. And I can tell you as a former DEA agent, there's a certain protocol that was put in place when you arrest these individuals, when you process these individuals, you get that information and you try and assess, where are they from? Are they actual gang members, or are they just someone caught up by mistake? Right.
All right, let's talk about the other side of the planet. There was an airstrike against the Houthi rebels. That's an escalation in a theater of, well, not necessarily war, but that is sort of a warlike activity. Are the Houthi rebels really a big issue?
Well, I mean, if you look at the whole Middle Eastern situation, right, the Houthi rebels are a terrorist organization that are supported by another terrorist organization called Iran. Now, they've killed, I think, maybe 6 individuals and sunk in a few ships, right? So they're jeopardizing, the Suez Canal, putting lives at risk, and using terrorist operations to do that. So I think the U.S. as well as the other European nations have a responsibility, right, to secure those safeways. So, under the Biden administration, the Houthis were simply allowed to rain terror over the entire Suez Canal area. So I think now what we're seeing under the Trump administration is, like we saw with Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan and ISIS in Iraq, we're seeing the U.S. step up and successfully mitigate this terrorist threat.
But they seem to be a religious-based group, in their mottos, death to Jews, death to America, death to Israel, all that good stuff. But they're what? They're pirating ships in the seas around the Arabian Peninsula?
Well, I wouldn't say they're necessarily pirating ships like we saw with the Somali pirates a few years ago when they were taking over ships on the east coast of West.
So they're not stealing from them; they're just sinking them.
They're just sinking them and restricting the traffic through the Suez Canal. To go around the Point of Africa is extremely expensive. If you think about more than half of the world's commerce is transiting through the Mediterranean, the Suez Canal, right into the Indian Ocean. But if you cut that off, that severely hampers global trade and creates a significant security problem. Because really what we're doing is we're allowing the Iranians, which is a state terrorist organization, to control those waterways.
All right, last question, Michael Brown from Rigaku. The Ukraine-Russian deal seemed like that had been at least agreed upon in principle last week, yet Russia hasn't signed it yet. Is that thing falling apart? I
think it remains to be seen, right? We don't know what exactly Putin's going to agree to. And it's a little bit outside my purview as a narcotic agent, but someone who's worked overseas in the diplomatic sense, I would say we still have to see what is Putin willing to agree with. Is he going to be willing to give up some territory, or is he not going to give up any territory? I think that's what it's going to come down to. All right, Michael Brown, Rigaku, I appreciate your expertise on The James Show, sir. All right, sir. Take care. Hey there, welcome back to The James Show. It's News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. Certainly you've heard of some of the stories about Teslas being vandalized. You've seen people spray paint swastikas on it. I've seen a few Kings of Cybertrucks, where they scratch it on there. I saw a guy we watched him scratch a swastika in the side of some poor dude's Cybertruck. And then he's all baffled when the police show up, like, what? I'm just fighting fascists. It's continuing on both a high level and a low level. There's the guys out there who have set entire dealerships of Teslas on fire. Like, I've seen a row of Teslas that got burnt up yesterday. I've seen the charging stations where a handful of those were just billowing out all kinds of smoke. We've seen windows broken at Tesla dealerships. We've seen all kinds of cars and dealerships spray painted. We've seen dealerships get occupied with a bunch of people screaming and holding their signs and not allowing commerce and business to happen. So there's been a lot of violence, intimidation, coercion for a political cause. And we all know that's literally the definition of terrorism: violence or intimidation in furtherance of a political cause, by non-military actors. Boom, there you go. But let's not just, throw a terrible term at them and pretend like we did something here. There's also the extreme change in opinion from almost all of these people on Elon Musk in just a small span. Do you remember how much the media loved Elon Musk? Do you remember how much of a hero Elon Musk was? I'll just play a little taste of the montage of the media.
I would argue that the new Jesus Christ of our era are Steve Jobs and Elon Musk, and it's important to have heroes.
The 47-year-old engineer has been called the real-life Tony Stark, better known as Iron Man.
Yeah, all right, so you get it. So he was beloved here, right? But this is when all the people thought that he was on their side. They thought he was on Team Blue, and he was on Team Blue. He spent most of his life being a Democrat, voting for Democrats, donating to Democrat causes. But you could say the same thing about Donald Trump. You could say the same thing about Joe Rogan. You could say the same thing about Russell Brand. You could say the same thing about so many other people who have been left in the lurch by this weird shift in the Overton window of topics that we get to even talk about these days. So when it comes to people like Mark Kelly is the senator from Arizona. His wife got shot, Gabby Giffords. He's an astronaut. He's got a hell of a story, but his politics are terrible. Mark Kelly says he sold his Tesla and he got himself a new Chevy Tahoe. And wait a second. That burns gas, sir. And the whole reason you said you got the Tesla was to save the Earth. The Earth was hanging in the balance. Millions of people are going to die. Hundreds of millions of people are going to die. The oceans are going to boil. The seas are going to rise. There's going to be famine, pestilence, plagues, dogs living with cats. It was going to be terrible. Well, unless a guy I politically disagrees with owns a company. And then I'm going to go get this gas-burning car? You didn't even go get another EV? Ladies and gentlemen, Tesla is the only profitable electric car company in the history of humanity. And it's been tried over and over. It's been tried since the 1800s. And for a while there, when the first, auto industry was figuring itself out, there were electric cars and gas cars that went side by side. And ever since then, gas cars have beaten electric cars. And this is the first guy to do it. And we have thrown trillions, especially globally, trillions at green energy, at wind, at solar, at electric vehicles, at the batteries, at the charging stations, at all this. And then you're what? Going to throw it out the window because you disagree with the guy's politics? So was this really all about the Earth or not? Was this really about saving the planet? Because now if all of y'all just hate this guy in a small span of time because you don't agree with some other political opinions we have, well, then you're main driving, motivating factor was not the earth. It was not your benevolence in trying to save your fellow man. It all just boiled down to political control. Listen to MSNBC. Just tell a pretty obvious lie here.
Also overnight have this post claiming that protests at Tesla dealerships are illegal. He said today he would label violence against dealerships domestic terrorism. Now, you know I am judicious in how I play this sound, but I think you need to hear it from him.
He said violence against terrorists.
Talks about some of the violence that's been going on in the country at dealerships. Some say they should be labeled domestic terrorists.
I will do that.
Now here comes the lie right after.
We catch anybody doing it because they're harming a great American company. Let me tell you, you do it to Tesla and you do it to any company, we're going to catch you and you're going to go through hell.
So just to be clear, you protest a private company, you are labeled by this administration a domestic terrorist.
No, that's not what they said at all. You immediately, just aggressively misinterpret that, or I don't know. How do you not intentionally reframe that? She said violence before the sound clip. In the sound clip, the word was violence. She's like, well, anyone who protests a company is a terrorist. No, anyone who commits violence against a company is a terrorist, because that fits the definition. If the truth is on your side, why do you got to lie? All right, Collective Soul and Live. This is not a time warp to the 90s. They are doing the Summer Unity Tour. It comes to the Pavilion at Toyota Music Factory August 13th. For tickets and information, go to livenation.com, or you can text SOUL, like Collective Soul. Text SOUL to 800-288-9227 for your chance to win a pair of tickets. SOUL, SOUL, to 800-288-9227. 9227. Coming up next, we're going to talk to the Heritage Foundation about the economy on The James Show. It's News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3.